And hello from the campus of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We welcome you to today's SEI webcast. 5 essential questions for implementing the software acquisition pathway and the tools to tackle them. My name is Shane McGraw. I'm the outreach team lead here at the Software Engineering Institute. I'd like to thank you for attending. We want to make our webcast today as interactive as possible, so you can submit questions in the YouTube chat area now, and we'll get to as many as we can. Now I'd like to introduce our featured speakers for today. Eileen Rubel serves as the Technical Director of the Transforming Software Acquisition Practice and Policy Directorate here at the SEI. She's responsible for coordinating the strategic planning and tactical execution of the SEI's initiative to power bolder, faster, more adaptive acquisition, modernization, and sustainment of software-enabled capability. Bridget O'Hearn is a Senior Software Acquisition Innovation Specialist, also here at the SEI, working in our Software Solutions Division. O'Hearn coaches and mentors software acquisition program personnel, influences DoD software and cyber policy, influences DoD software workforce initiatives, and contributes to research projects. Welcome, Eileen and Bridget. Eileen, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shane. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Beautiful, cloudy, rainy-ish Pittsburgh, and wherever you may be. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time today. There's a word from our lawyers. To set the tone for today. First, we're going to set a little bit of context about the Department of War software acquisition pathway. And then we're going to launch into what I hope is a really fun and informative discussion for you about 5 essential questions for program teams to help set up for success in implementing the software acquisition pathway on a defense acquisition program. And then we're going to talk about a really cool new project that our team at the SEI is doing called the Software Acquisition Go Bag, which is intended to provide tools for anyone working in software acquisition to really meet the moment and deliver effective capability the right time, every time, to the right user every time. So just to set a little bit of context, even though the software acquisition pathway was first released in 2020, our pre-registration data for today's event indicated that I think most of the folks who've registered to join us today really aren't very familiar with the software acquisition pathway. So I'm going to ask Bridget to do a little bit of context setting about what the software acquisition pathway is and what the current imperatives are and why it's important.
All right. Thank you, Eileen. And I'm coming to you all live from Arlington, Virginia, where it is not so rainy and cloudy today. You may see the sun shining out there on this nice fall day, which is very exciting. So let's talk about why the software acquisition pathway has become such a big focus lately. If you're not familiar, on March 6th of this year, the Secretary of War issued a memo called Directing Modern Software Acquisition to Maximize Lethality. The essence of the memo was to really focus on transforming software acquisition. Why? Because we need to acquire, deliver, and iterate on our software at speed and scale. Get that to our warfighter quicker than we ever have before. So how are we going to do that? The Secretary of War actually directed all components to adopt the software acquisition pathway as the preferred pathway for software development. So that means not just applications, but business systems and weapon systems. So that is much more a wider group of folks than what we have seen to date that have adopted the software acquisition pathway. So let's go on to the next slide, Eileen, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the software pathway actually is. So it is a Department of War policy, which is documented in Instruction 5000.87. If you're not familiar, it's very succinct, talks about implementing modern methods, modern software development methods using Agile, DevSecOps, automation, using model-based systems engineering. And really, one of the objectives of the pathway is to facilitate rapid and iterative delivery of software capabilities to the user. So this isn't your father's acquisition, right? This isn't where it takes you 5 years to get a release to your users. This is getting a release to your users in less than a year, hopefully much less than a year if we can. And the pathway was designed to remove those traditional defense acquisition constraints. So all the big phase gated milestones that you all might be familiar with in the way that today hardware is acquired, we don't want to acquire software in that same way. We want to use commercial best practices in the department to really deliver that capability so that those industry best practices, those modern approaches, and one of the other keys is user engagement. We are in the department really having those users engaged in a way that we haven't in the past. All right, next slide.
Thanks, Bridget. I know Shane has set out a polling question. We're going to tuck into 5 essential questions that program teams need to be asking themselves to help devise the strategies and tactics to really execute and set up for success in a software program. And so last month, I think we dropped a blog post on this topic that really delved into these 5 big questions and set up our cool new project on the software acquisition go bag. And so I know Shane has launched a poll question to see how many of you out there in TV land have had an opportunity to read the blog. Shane, I don't know if we've got numbers.
82% no.
Okay.
18% yes.
So thank you so much to the 18% of you that have already read it. Those of you who haven't, we're going to talk at all of this about everything in that at a high level today, but there's some really great detail in the homework that you have on the screen now. You can snap to that QR code that'll take you straight there, or you can feel to type in that very big long URL.
We'll put it in the chat.
On the SCI,
Yep.
Put it in the chat, and it's on the SCI website. Over the last several years, as our team at the SCI has worked with defense acquisition programs, with our mission partners at the SCI, with industrial-based partners, with policy owners, we've had an opportunity to observe a lot of the places where program teams might be struggling or might not be well set up for success, because the software pathway is new. And we're learning as we go. And we kept identifying sort of the same sets of patterns over and over that identified some foundational questions and concerns that we really thought that were this essential front end to helping program teams understand where they are in context to devise and execute effective strategies for their programs. And so that's where the 5 essential questions for setting you up for success on the software pathway come in. So I'm going to ask Bridget to start talking about what does it mean to be ready to adopt the software pathway.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. So as Eileen mentioned, we've helped hundreds of programs and had experience helping a ton of the programs on the software acquisition pathway. And so we might have seen some that were brand new programs that were just setting up. And so maybe those new programs already had adopted those modern software development practices like Agile and DevSecOps. Or in some cases, we have seen programs that have been, programs that have been around for 10, 20 years that are still in acquisition, and they have not yet adopted those practices. And so what we have found is, while the policy says things like, oh, you need these specific documents, an acquisition decision memo, and a capability needs statement, which are your requirements documents, that's what the policy says you need to adopt the pathway. There's so much more. There's so much more in really making sure the program office, the users, the sponsor, the product teams really have embraced those modern practices like Agile, DevSecOps, have the right cultures that have really been ingrained into those programs. So it's not about having your documents perfect. It's really about making sure your program has embraced all of the things to really be able to, back to the memo, deliver at speed and scale. And so you have to have that foundation, which we found some programs just don't have.
And before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to encourage everybody. Shane is monitoring the chat window, and so if you have questions about any of the essential questions, you see what I did there. Please pop them in there, and Shane will work with us to try to get those answered as much as we can in real time. So understanding that being ready is more than the policy readiness requirement, that really understanding how to how to execute in an iterative and incremental fashion, having embraced and deployed automated tooling and automated test environments and those kinds of things under DevSecOps, and have that perspective that you've got the really engaged user community. You've got those stakeholders really prepared to be along on the journey with you in this shift left mindset, this iterative and incremental delivery mindset. There's lots of programs where they don't have that experience, and that's absolutely sort of step number one.
Yes.
Okay, and you mentioned this capability needs statement, Bridget, as the policy requirement. So let's talk more about that and what that means and how it's different from what we know from the past.
Yes. So, again, if, people in the audience are familiar with large scale acquisition, the big hardware centric acquisition that maybe, they grew up on, it required this very detailed requirements document, often called a CDD, a capability design document, that you would have very detailed requirements spelled out. And in that case, it really did not allow a lot of trade space to be able to implement and make smart decisions in acquisition. The capability needs statement is the requirements document that is used for the software acquisition pathway, but it's different than that old school requirements document in that it has very high level requirements. And in doing that, it allows the trade space you don't get from those other documents. And so that gives the program office, the product team, the sponsor, the users, all the folks that are involved, the ability to have some flexibility as they move through the process, so they're not very tied to requirements that are documented in a contract that only allow them to implement in a very specific way. So that CNS is really, really key. And again, we've seen those CNSs implemented in different ways. Unfortunately, sometimes programs are in a hurry and they say, oh, we're just going to copy our old requirements document, slap a new title on it, and call it a CNS. Doesn't work very well because it doesn't execute as well in that agile environment that we're operating in the software acquisition pathway. So that's one thing that we've seen. Another we've seen is that capability needs statement is written, and then a few months or maybe a year past, they realize that wasn't quite what we wanted. And that's okay, because one of the things that the software pathway encourages is that you're constantly looking at those documents and you're revising them as needed. So you have the ability to go back and edit it if you need to make those changes. So it's intended to be flexible. It's intended to be a living document. And that is one thing that we have really found is we're seeing more and more programs that are beginning to really understand how to get those high level documents, high level requirements that again allow the trade space that you want.
We came up in the legacy acquisition environment. We came up in an environment where changing the requirements was almost a curse word.
Yes.
Right. And we talked about instability in requirements being a bad thing, without really recognizing that we needed the ability to adapt to new threat environments, to advances in technology, to changing priorities, both in the mission space and even in the budget. And so getting comfortable with this concept that the capability needs statement is it is a high level to give you that ability to adapt without being bolted to the floor and talking about requirements changes like they're a curse word.
Yes, exactly.
So we have any questions from?
No questions yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That means they're listening to us and they're rapt. Nobody wants to have their fingers on the keyboard. I'll take it. All Our third essential question is about assessing progress and identifying risks early and often. And I'm not talking about legacy like risk cubes that I think we're all familiar with, risk matrices. But really what we're talking about is often program teams that we work with will say, oh, we just found out the day of this software drop that one capability that we expected to be in here had to slip for another 12 weeks. And we were collecting all these metrics on the software delivery and we didn't see it coming, or we see a cost overrun way too late. Oftentimes the way our procedurals and metrics reporting are set up, we're forced to try to make today's decision or tomorrow's decision with data that's only accurate to 6 weeks ago or a month ago. Data is a strategic asset, and metrics to understand progress of development and quality and progress in a program are so much more than the software pathway, obviously. And I think Bridget can talk to this more too. There's a set of metrics that when you're on the software pathway that you report up to the policy owner every 6 months. And those things are for the policy owner, right, to really understand how is the acquisition policy, how is the software pathway achieving its goals, what directions are things moving in the department. But those by themselves are not the things that you use to understand the progress of a program, whether you're in trouble, whether you're hitting the mark, how quality is. Those aren't sufficient for a program manager or for an engineering manager to understand, are they on track to meet the need? Bridget, do you want to talk more about this, about measurement and data and insight?
Sure. So I like to explain it this way. I had a boss that said, I feel like we're managing our program by looking in the rear view mirror at where we've been instead of where we're going. And so that is not the way to manage a program where you're trying to go fast. You need that real-time insight into how things are going. And like you said, Eileen, the traditional way programs would look at metrics is it got delivered 30, 60, 90 days maybe after something happened. You just don't have the ability to adjust. And so we really do encourage, in this case, having those real-time metrics that hopefully are already built into your DevSecOps pipelines, into your agile processes, and being able to have the program office, the product developers, that instant access into being able to see things while they're coming at you instead of you've already been hit by it and you're already in a ditch, right? You want to make sure you really have that insight. And as you said, yes, the software pathway requires specific metrics that are reported twice a year. If many of you may be familiar with DORA, the DORA metrics, there's about 5 metrics that give some high-level insight into programs and their performance. Those are the kinds of metrics that are being reported to the department. So again, they can see how the pathway is performing, but a program needs many more metrics than that, as you said, Eileen.
Yeah, and there can be a tendency sometimes to say, oh, well, we'll just collect all the data. And we don't want to swing that way either. And so this essential question is really about understanding, what are you going to need to know in order to know if you're reaching your goals, in order to know if you're hitting the mark or if you're off course, and making sure that your systems, your procedurals or your data access requirements, making sure that things are set up so that you're able to access and understand and interpret that information.
Absolutely. I remember one time, Eileen, I had someone come up to me very proudly say, hey, did you know we're collecting more than 300 metrics on the program? And I stood there and went, okay, well, that's great, but which ones are important to you? And they couldn't answer the question. They had so many metrics that they didn't know, right? How to really focus on the ones that would help them make the right decision. So that's one of the pieces that we're hoping to help get at with that question. So on question 4, right, the user agreement. So this is another piece we haven't talked about yet, another piece of the software pathway that is the way that you document the user engagement. So we mentioned early on, the user engagement is key with a software pathway. And so this is a way that the program office and the users and the sponsor actually have that handshake in the way that they're going to interact, in the number of users that are going to be available for testing or planning or different parts of the process. And then making sure that that connects to actually providing value to those users on a frequent basis. And then those users are actually going to use the information that they have experienced to help provide a value assessment. That's another piece of the pathway that's pretty unique from the way the department has acquired things in the past. The user is signing up to be part of it and then signing up to say, I'm going to give a written report card of how we've actually the value that's been provided. So that's a really powerful way to be able to assess your return on investment in a program. You get that user feedback and that value assessment that gives you that information. Very powerful.
And then you can connect that into your overall data collection and measurement strategy to understand where you need to fine tune, and how those different combinations of metrics, as our colleague Bill Nichols is fond of saying, if you only have one metric, it doesn't matter, it's going to be wrong. Right. How those combinations, their combinations and trends give you insight, and then connect to what you experience, what the value assessment. And so a couple of things that we've seen that have created challenges with that really important that user agreement really is that handshake, right?
Yes.
It says this is what everybody's signing up to. A couple of things that we've seen are situations where perhaps that's not the right, that agreement isn't between parties at the right level to have the cognizance of the day-to-day execution, or maybe also you might not have all of the right users.
Yes.
Right. And the users could change. And if you think about different kinds of users, with a fighter, a pilot is a user, but so are the maintainers.
Yes.
And so that needs to be a living, breathing document that you regularly, reevaluate. You're regularly reevaluating the value assessments, just like with that capability needs statement.
Yes, you want to absolutely revisit those. And as you said, depending on the program, you might actually have either a portfolio approach to the user agreement or multiple user agreements because you have different kinds of users. So you gave the example of a fighter program. So yes, a pilot is a user that you would want to ask questions and help with demonstrations and testing for things that are part of the aircraft. But the maintainers, as you mentioned, might have a separate system that is an off-board piece that collects information from the aircraft. And so those are different users that have different input and are going to interact differently than the pilots do. So implementing the user agreement can vary amongst different programs depending on, is it a system of systems? How big is the program? How many users are involved? You may have very different perspectives and approaches depending on the different kinds of users you had. And as you said, you're going to want to revisit that at least annually to make sure that it's working for the program.
Yeah, really cooking in that comfort with change, that we have to build in those checkpoints so that we know we may need to adjust, and building those checkpoints in so that we're not surprised.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's talk about essential question number 5, which has been a really big one, especially in the weapon systems community, because there haven't been terribly many weapon systems programs yet that have adopted the software pathway. And I think this is one of the big challenges that folks are working to get their arms around.
Yes, absolutely. So let me start with, our viewers may be familiar with what a minimum viable product is, but a minimum viable capability release, an MVCR, people might scratch their head and go, well, what is that? So the MVP is the piece of software, the release that is going to go to the users for some fast feedback, right? That's where the users are going to, using the user agreement, the users that have been agreed to are going to actually test that out, give some fast feedback, and give back to the product developers and the program office feedback on, hey, these are some things that were great or maybe need to be tweaked so that we can actually get something fielded so that the users can have something in their hands. That's what is the MVCR. The MVCR is the minimum marketable product if you're thinking commercial, right? That is the thing that you're going to give to your users and then you're going to continually build on. So that MVCR is the very first release that'll be fielded in the software pathway. So for a weapon system, as you mentioned, Eileen, that might be a little bit different because you've got all these hardware considerations, and you have to think about, okay, am I going to wait for the hardware to catch up, or can I get the software out? Can I have the software ready in advance of having the hardware ready? And one of the nice things about the software pathway is it does account for embedded programs, those kind of weapon systems, and says that you can actually deliver to an operationally representative environment. That just means a hardware in the loop lab or some kind of a test lab. So you don't necessarily have to wait for the aircraft to be built and sitting on the runway to actually say the software has been delivered. So working through that with a program and saying, hey, you can actually have your software ready, and you can kind of disconnect that from your hardware readiness and allow the software to continue to evolve. And then you're going to continue to do that with subsequent releases. So you'll see that terminology in the software pathway, MVP, MVCR, and then releases from there on.
Thanks, Bridget. So these are all questions that are really focused on the software acquisition pathway itself. There's how many we have 5, 6, 7 different acquisition pathways under the adaptive acquisition framework policy.
Yes.
And so these are not the only questions that the only decisions that folks in program teams have to make in order to set programs up for success and execute them successfully. But these are really these are the ones that, you know, as we've been working with our mission partners and out in the community and hearing feedback from industry partners and everything, these are the ones that really seem to be foundational to launching and setting up for success when using the software acquisition pathway specifically. There's most of the software in the department right now isn't on the software pathway, and there's Bridget, you talked about the Secretary of War's the policy imperative to prefer the software pathway. But a lot of the things that you need to do well to successfully acquire software aren't dependent on the policy, the software pathway policy provisions.
Right.
And so while these are absolutely core foundational questions for launching a software pathway program, there's so much more to successful software acquisition or acquisition of software enabled capability that we're going to talk about in a little bit too. I will pause to see if we have any questions from TV land.
No questions yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're wrapped. They're they're glued
They're on the edge of their
glued
seat.
to the screen. Okay. And so that brings us to our very new cool project that Bridget and myself and our whole team at the SCI have been working on, which we've named the Software Acquisition Go Bag. As I said, we work with industry partners. We work with defense programs. We work with policy owners. We participate in a number of communities throughout the department and in the software engineering research community and out in industry. And as the department's software and cybersecurity FFRDC, right, we have this pretty privileged position that we take very, very seriously, operating at the nexus of industry and the government and academia. And so as we kept seeing different flavors of these sort of foundational core challenges on the software pathway, our team got to thinking and we really set to work to figure out a way to continuously and very quickly and incrementally put tools in the hands of everybody involved in defense software acquisition, to help enable them to develop evidence-based, right? Use evidence-based practices, techniques, and tools to make sense of their specific program context, and work across all the different disciplines and stakeholders involved in programs, to really set themselves up well. And so that brings us to the go bag.
Yay.
Like many of you out there in TV land, I am prior service. Once upon a time, I wore a blue suit. And anytime any of us go anywhere in the world to execute our mission, there's this core stuff that you take with you, right? There's all the stuff that you need. But then there's the things that you need because the context in which you're operating matters. Where you're going, the weather, the state of the infrastructure, the tools that are going to be available to you, whether you're working with coalition partners, whether you're in a bear-based environment. And so you need not just the basics to do your job, but you really need to understand what are the specific tools and equipment that context needs for you to be able to effectively execute your mission. Acquisitions, the same. Maybe I'm not carrying a physical bag of metrics and capability needs statements and my program context everywhere, but having the right tools to make sense of the information in your context really matters, because for example, what a capability release for software, for sensor software that goes on a fighter aircraft is going to be different from a capability release for a defense business system. And that's where the go bag came in. There's a ton of great templates for all the necessary documents and things for executing your software, for executing your acquisition programs on DAU's fantastic website about the adaptive acquisition framework. And we're not trying to replicate any of that. What we're doing is taking all of the things that we have learned and deployed through integrating data and software engineering research and acquisition practice and evidence from programs, and putting that into small, extensible collections of kits for program teams to pick and choose from to help them make decisions to set their program up for success in their context. And so I said earlier that you don't have to be on the software acquisition pathway to be acquiring software. And the things you need to do to be successful aren't just functions of the policy itself. And so software acquisition go bag is really about anything you need to be doing in software acquisition, regardless of which one of those adaptive acquisition framework policy paths that you're on. But because of the imperative to move toward the software pathway and these repeated like foundational questions that we kept encountering, the very first kit that we're releasing is going to be called our Software Pathway Essentials Kit, which is going to focus on these 5 essential questions that Bridget and I have been talking about with you today. So I'm going to flip to the next slide, and Bridget's going to take it away and tell you more about what's in the go bag.
All right. Thanks, Eileen. So one of the things that you're going to see in the next couple of weeks when we start releasing our assets is you're going to get the meatier information. It's going to be a short, quick document, but it's going to have your tools and techniques, the experience that we've gathered from programs. It's going to focus on some of the topics that we've talked about, things like metrics and CNS and user agreement. All of those things will be tactical guides. That'll be kind of your meaty information that we're going to have for you. We're also going to create supplements. So it'll be things like the slides from this webinar today. We'll have experience reports. Those will be things that are actual lessons learned from programs that we've worked with over the years. So you'll get some actual real experience feedback on things that might have been a challenge for a program and the things that they did to implement that. Then we're going to take those tactical guides and supplements and we're going to create kits for you that you can stick in your go bag. So as Eileen said, the software pathway essentials will be the first one, but we'll have other ones as we go along that will focus on other areas. So again, this isn't just for the software acquisition pathway. As Eileen mentioned, there's 6 adaptive acquisition pathways. And guess what? You can acquire software on all 6 of them. So you can use these tools no matter what acquisition pathway you're on. Or to be honest, maybe you're not even supporting the department. Maybe you're in commercial industry and you're trying to find a better way to interact with your users or document your requirements. You can use these tools as well. And so we'll have those things in kits. You can pull tactical guides and supplements together and create your own kits. You put what you need in your go bag, just like Eileen said. Depending on the conditions in which your program is operating, you might need a different mix than what we have kitted together for you. All right.
So Bridget, I think we have some questions from TV land. Shane, if you want to.
Yeah, first one is that the quality and capability of MVPs seem to vary considerably. Do you have any words of advice for such?
Yeah, I'll say they definitely do vary. Again, in my opinion, the key is to get something out. The MVP is about getting that user feedback, right? And you might actually iterate on an MVP a couple of times before you decide, the program decides that they're ready to turn it into an MVCR and actually release it. So you want that fast feedback. You want to get some amount of content out. And the way I look at it is you want capability that can help a user immediately. So maybe you're looking at it and let's just say you have some big, personnel system and what the users are really dying for is something that gives them information on pay. Well, if you can give them the module that gives them that information on pay, you don't need all the rest of the pieces just yet. You can give that to them now to operate, and then you can incrementally provide them other capabilities. You want to get to providing incremental value. And so that's really the focus. It's not about how many capabilities can I shove into an MVP and turn it into an MVCR. It's about getting value quickly to your users.
Anything to add, Eileen?
No, I think that was fantastic. Do we have it?
Yeah, then Kenny had asked if releases to a hardware in the loop lab count toward the requirements to release at a 6-month intervals, is there a risk that the actual delivery to the warfighter are still very slow?
Well, great question. So Eileen mentioned earlier, right? The reason that the Go Bag is not focused on just the software acquisition pathway is because you have all of these external processes that impact actually getting things to your user, right? So you have to have your cybersecurity, your ATO, right? You have to have, depending on if it's a weapon system, you may have to have, your system safety, your airworthiness. If you have a nuclear system, you have to go through a nuclear process. All of those processes take time. And much like the way the software pathway encourages that user engagement, you want to really engage with those certification authorities. Get them involved, because the more you can get them involved in what you're doing, the more you can reduce the risk, which I think was the question, to getting something out and something fielded. You've got to help the whole process move along. The software pathway helps you with the software, but those external processes are things you have to work to.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, well, we'll pop ahead and then we'll see if we get any more questions. So, wow, I realized we put a lot of words on here. So who is this for? We've been talking about all the work that we've been doing in the community with mission partners, with programs, policy owners. And what we really wanted to get at, sort of an underlying design principle, if you will, is that our industrial-based partners are an integral part of the equation. Our users and other stakeholders are an integral part of the equation. T&E organizations are an integral part of the equation. And really, all of this is designed to make sure that we are getting people out of their functional expertise silos and able to engage across the table with each other as they're working through these issues. And so you might be a program manager in a program office, trying to figure out your acquisition strategy. You might be a PM at a industrial based partner who wants to make sure that they are designing their own internal quality and progress, measurement and surveillance programs in a way that's going to enable them to provide the kinds of data that they need. You might be trying to figure out what are the most effective ways to engage users early in the process. But everything so every single one of the tactical guides and the supplemental assets, everything that's in the Go bag is going to be tagged with Iconography to help you really understand specifically who that particular asset is likely to, is really targeted for, or who's going to benefit the most from it. And generally speaking, most of these things probably aren't going to have just one icon on them, because that probably defeats the point. But we're going to be doing some work. Bridget's going to talk about this a little bit later. We're going to be doing some work on helping to reason about effectively, building an effective capability needs statement. Right. And so you can see how, that's relevant to our users, it's relevant to our sponsors, and it's relevant to, our program office team. So we're going to be building a lot of stuff to help folks work together across their specific areas of expertise. But we're also trying to make it really, really simple to navigate across what's going to be in the Go bag and figure out what you need to have in your Go bag. So Bridget, let's talk about the Essentials Kit.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We have just a phenomenal kit coming your way. So I mentioned supplements and tactical guides when we were talking about what's in the bag. So our first two supplements are going to be, first, a user's guide. So that's going to talk about the icons that Eileen just talked about, the kinds of things that you're going to find in the Go bag and the different assets and resources that we're going to provide. It's going to give you that kind of understanding the look and feel and what to expect. And then there's going to be a supplement on what's the software acquisition pathway. So we only spent 2 slides today, giving very high level information about the software acquisition pathway. This supplement is going to give you a lot more detail. So as Eileen said, the DAU website gives a lot of good information. You could go read the policy. This supplement is actually going to give you information, again, based on real input and feedback that we've gotten by working with programs. So that will give you a little bit more insight and detail than you might get by reading those other things. Then we've got the tactical guide. So you'll notice 1 through 5, guess what? Those align to the 5 questions we've been talking about today. So the first one is ready, set, go. It's going to answer the question about, are you ready to adopt the software pathway? The cracking the CNS code is going to give you real information about how to structure a CNS, how to think through how you develop it, how to get people involved in creating it, what the different content is. And again, back to that trade space, making sure you leave room and keep those requirements at a high level to give you the trade space you need while you're developing your software. The third one is pack light, measure right. So it's going to go back to those metrics we talked about earlier. And it's going to focus on, again, the software pathway is going to ask programs for very specific metrics to be reported, again, for really determining whether the pathway is healthy. So it'll talk about those because those are important metrics to collect, but it'll also talk about other things, performance metrics, program insight that a program manager really needs. So again, they're not managing by looking in the rearview mirror. Number 4 is going to be focused on the user agreement. And 5, again, the MVP, MVCR, and planning for releases. It's going to talk about, again, if you have an embedded weapon system that's on another pathway, it's going to give you some details and really how to think about how to structure those. So we're going to release new tactical guides and supplements iteratively. And here's where we really need everyone's help. So as Eileen said, for all the people in TV land, we need your feedback. Tell us what things you're interested in. Tell us what information you would really be interested in having supplements or tactical guides on. So I'll tell you, when we did the registration and we asked some questions in the registration, we actually got quite a few of you that said you were interested in information on test and evaluation. Great. We can help with that. If there are other areas like that, please tell us what those are. So every few weeks, we'll release a tactical guide and we'll have a webcast just like this to answer questions, to walk you through it, and again, get more feedback from you to tell us what other kinds of information you'd be interested. And so we'll continue to build out those kits. We'll work with program teams over time. We'll create more supplements, more tactical guides. And that all goes back to real information that we've gotten from programs that we've worked with for many years. And by the way, all of these resources are at no cost. These are publicly available resources to help programs, and there's no cost associated with it.
Thanks, Bridget. So what should you do next? Pick up your bag. That QR code there takes you to the top level page for all the information that we talked about today and all the detail we talked about today about the Go Bag. It also takes you to opportunities to send us questions and feedback directly through the SCI website, and subscribe to our outreach mailing list so that so you're the coolest kid on the block and you're one of the first people to learn when we drop our new tactical guides and other material. And as Bridget said, every time we release one of those guides, a few weeks later, we're going to do an event just like this where we can talk about what you've seen in it, what questions you have, what feedback you have, to help us continue to prioritize where the biggest areas of need. How can we meet those most critical questions, and what else are folks interested in? As we mentioned earlier, the blog post that really laid out the 5 essential questions in more detail and talks in more detail about GoBag is also available there. And so we do this work in collaboration with teams across the SEI who are working with mission partners facing different kinds of challenges. We collaborate with researchers at the SEI to be working to help programs set up to be able to be adaptable and quickly adopt commercial and scientific innovation in programs. We're hoping to do get feedback from industry partners to help really ensure that we're getting to representing those concerns about how you want to be involved in the handshake, right? To be an effective partner. This is a project that the SEI is building, but it's your Go Bag. And so the more that you drop us a note, offer us some feedback, or once we've started the ball rolling on the tactical guides, as you use these assets in programs and in your environment, we would love to hear from you about what's working for you, what's not, whether you have a story that you want to share with our community too. But so really, what you should do next is go to the website and pick up your bag and get ready to pack it. Ready, Set, Go is going to be released in a couple weeks, and then shortly after that, we'll have cracking the CNS code. And so within a few weeks, you'll see that. You'll see us back here probably late November for another one of these great sit downs with Shane and maybe with some special guests to talk about Ready, Set, Go. And we're really excited about this. So we're hoping that those of you out there in the community are excited to work with us and provide us your insight and your feedback too. Shane, I don't know if we have any other questions from out there.
No, you guys nailed it. Great presentation. I really appreciate you guys sharing your expertise today and launching this important work. So lastly, we'd like to thank you each for attending today. As always, you can subscribe to the SEI's YouTube channel by clicking on the SEI seal in the lower right corner of the video window. Any questions from today, you can send to info@sei.cmu.edu. Bridget, Eileen, thank you very much. Any final words before we wrap up?
Thanks so much for having us, Shane. I'm just so excited about this. We've been doing this work with folks for so long, and I'm so excited to have something that's really, like I said, it's going to belong to everybody in the community. We're really itching to do more and launch right out the gate. So, Bridget, any final words?
Yeah, again, super excited. We're really looking forward to everyone's feedback, and thank you all for joining us today.
Yes, everyone. Thanks, one. Have a great day. See you soon.
Bye, all.